Hello, BookTube, and welcome to Epic Comic Book Wednesday, a world's finest collaboration between Michael K. Vaughan and myself, where we combine the forces of stately Vaughan Manor, or in this case, rustic Vaughan Lodge and Hyde Cottage, to talk about comic books. And this started out as a tour on Mike's channel that he was just doing innocently. You're all just innocently minding your own business until I latch onto something you're doing. He was innocently touring the Epic collections in his comic book collection. That is a full-color paperback reprint collection line done by Marvel Comics that is separate from their Masterworks line. It's not going strictly chronological. It bounces all around 70 years of continuity. And the Epic collections are really good. They could easily not be. They could easily be cheap and poor. They would still do well with fans who are hungry for this material. But instead, they're really, really good. They're thick. They're a little pricey, $50 a piece, but you get a lot for that money. You get basically everything except the letters that were in the individual issues. And the non-sequential arrangement allows Marvel Comics to bounce all around their timeline rather than stick with just going 81, 82, 83, 84. And as a result, the Marvel Epic collections have done really well. They've been really popular for Marvel. Several of them have been reprinted because their original editions sold out. And this has been a sore spot. I mean, Michael K. Vaughan started that tour. I latched on. We've started talking about comics. We've been doing it for years now. And one of the very few things that we agree on is that DC Comics, so Marvel and DC being the two big superhero publishers, and Marvel publishing the loser heroes, the ones who are in therapy, whereas DC publishes the real heroes. And DC has a terrible reprint ethos. Marvel has always done a better job of that than, or not, actually not always. For a long time, DC did a better job of reprinting than Marvel, including flooding the stands every month with reprint-oriented issues that you could buy for 15 cents. But in the last 30 years, Marvel has taken that game away completely. And DC is only slowly realizing that it's sitting on money. It's basically what we're talking about here. Is if you have files, master files, whatever, of 90 years of comics, and you're just not making them available to a new generation of readers, you're sitting on money. The outlay for what it costs to make a reprint volume is almost certainly going to be much smaller than the profit of selling that volume. And so Mike and I often lamented the fact that although we have a million Marvel Epic collections to choose from, we could talk about an Epic collection every week from now until the cows come home and never run out of them. And Marvel is industriously printing new ones. Although the lineup of Epic collections for this year, so far, for Marvel, of new ones, not reprints of old ones, there's not much in there that appeals to me. But there's plenty of stuff in there that will appeal to a lot of people. Although Marvel has been doing that, DC has not been, or very laggardly. So, when Michael K. Vaughan told me that DC is apparently planning to launch a series that is very clearly their answer to Marvel's Epic collections, I was overjoyed. I don't know if it will actually happen. DC is also notorious for announcing plans that it does not follow through on. I don't see how that could happen in this case. Because here you'd be talking about technical people. The people involved here would have to be good at online pagination. They'd have to be good at the actual raw mechanics of reprinting older material and reformatting it and resizing it. And those won't be crazy. Those people won't be crazy. So you can give them an assignment and rely on the work without hearing anything about financial reparations or original ownership of land or their dating history. You won't be hearing any of that because none of that is professional material. Instead, you'll be giving them an assignment and they will be doing the assignment on time instead of not doing the assignment on time and not begging for your forgiveness, but instead complaining about the assignment on Twitter. So there are no of those other kinds of people involved. There are only professionals involved here, so I don't see why this wouldn't happen. But the mention of those other kinds of people brings us to the reason why this is such a good idea. Because reprint volumes, especially a line like this line is called DC Finest, some inexplicable reason. It's not. There's no possessive. It's not DC's finest. It's DC finest. It's coming out in the late autumn and winter, allegedly. We'll see. Uh, and the reasoning behind it is, okay, you're announcing DC Finest as a line coming out in the future, and it is reprinting issues from the past. And the reason why that makes sense as a strategy is because absolutely no one is interested in comics in the present. The past, yes. The future, sure. You can get us excited about a new project as long as it's a reprint project. But the present, no, not at all. And that's because Marvel and DC, the two major superhero companies, are completely ideologically captured by alt-left ideologues and also now murderers. They are mob mentality driven. They are identity politics up to their eyeballs, including lots and lots of lying about identity politics. And I wouldn't care what kind of marches they go to on the weekend or what priceless works of art they glue themselves to on holidays or whatnot. If they treated the comics with respect, that is incumbent on the fact that these things were created by other people, that they've been lovingly curated by other people, far more creative people than you have, people who spent their whole lives dedicated to these things, and you have now the incredible honor of being the latest custodian. They're not yours. They don't belong to you. They certainly don't have to reflect your Twitter timeline. But unfortunately, that is what happened. That has happened in these two companies. So, well, not only the comic book companies, but also the movie arms of those conglomerates that own the comics, as you will know if you've looked at any kind of superhero movie related news. If you know a longtime comic book fan, almost certainly, for instance, that comic book fan will be male, and almost certainly they'll be in their mid-50s. And if you ask them what they think of the announced casting decision for the new Fantastic Four movie to cast the Silver Surfer as a woman, you'll get an earful of what these comic book companies, both movie and the floppy print items, are doing. That has started to make inroads in the movies, and as a result, the movies have tanked. But it has for, a solid 8 years, it has completely commandeered the two superhero comic book companies, with the result that their sales have cratered. These things almost don't exist at all. They haven't been financially viable since this change started to become obvious, since all the characters started to be gratuitously race swapped, since all the characters started to be gratuitously sex swapped, since all the characters started revealing in their 80th year of appearing in color comic books that they were gay. And since the creators who were doing this kind of desecration to figures they didn't create and didn't shepherd started mouthing off the foulest, most bratty bigotry on social media for the whole world to see, and not reined in by their editors. So that has become true to such a point now that it's axiomatic. There's no point in even hoping that anything like that will be different. There's no point in hoping. You might get a little bit of difference if you're dealing with a second string company, Image or Dark Horse. You might get a little bit of difference if you're dealing with a franchised property where the blue-haired ideologues at the company are not the final say. It's actually the owner of the franchise who is doing the final say and will, at least technically, safeguard their property. We saw that is not the case with Savage Sword of Conan now being published. But you have a better chance there than otherwise. But for major superhero comic books, the two major superhero companies, no. That ship has long since sailed. There is not a question here of waiting for a glimmer of hope here and there, or seeing a relaunch of whatever and thinking, well, maybe this one won't be so horrible. Maybe this one won't be so incredibly food obsessed. Maybe this one won't be quite so sedentary. Maybe this one won't be so obviously announcing that it hates me personally, individually, so that your, Joe Maxwell in Indianapolis. You've been reading comics for 50 years. You open a new issue of Captain America, and the supervillain is named Joe Maxwell from Indiana. It's where you are the villain, where the creators are going on social media and saying that I hate my job anyway because this is all this pow and kapoo stuff is so childish, but I really hate the fans. And then they go on at great length to explain what those fans are like, and it's you. Uh, since that is the absolutely stem to stern endemic case of current comics, it makes sense to look back and to look forward, to look forward to a new reprint line. And DC has announced its first lineup of DC Finest. I thought we'd go through those, and then Mike thought it'd be a good idea if we both propose volumes that we would like to see in the DC Finest lineup. And I definitely have lots of suggestions along those lines. But first, let's go over what they're doing. The first one is Aquaman, King of Atlantis. Now, I didn't look to see whether or not the listings online are elaborating on what's reprinted in each of these volumes. But going by the cover here, this is classic Aquaman, with little Aqua Boy. So this will be. Well, it will be the standard version of Aquaman that you know, that most people know, despite the existence of two $500 million movies. Despite the existence of those movies, this is probably the version of the character that you think of. Golden chainmail, talks to fish, lives underwater. is a rather lame character. An interesting choice for them to do, and an interesting period if this cover is an actual illustration of what they're doing. Because Aquaman, believe it or not, has had some really good time periods. This is not one of them. This is just pure dork. I will love it for that reason, but still, they could have picked something else. Then this next one is Catwoman. I don't know what to tell you about this. Of course, Catwoman is one of the most famous characters in the Batman lineup. I almost said one of the most famous villains, but she has almost from the beginning not been portrayed explicitly as a villain. And sometimes when she's portrayed as a gray character, almost an anti-hero, she can be effectively done, but I know it's heresy because she has legions and legions of fans, but I've never thought this character worked particularly well as a standalone character. So I of the DC Finest volumes that are coming out this autumn, if they come out, I think this is one I'll just plain skip. I can't recall a period in Catwoman history where, was I blocking the baby? Oh, I was. I can't recall a period in Catwoman history where I would have been interested enough to buy a volume, because these things are going to be big. I think they're going to be very close to the Epic Collection line, in that they'll be full color. They'll probably be on slick paper. They'll be heavily square bound, and they'll probably be pricey, probably $50 or $60. The one thing I don't know, that you can't know yet, is will DC do the same kind of love and care that Marvel does on the Epic Collection line, where you get lots of stuff. You don't just get issues poorly reprinted. And I think the answer to that question that we have to give until we are forcibly proven wrong is no, they will not do that. The whole point of how well the Epic Collection is done is how unbelievably rare that is in the Marvel in the current comic book world. Almost everything is done poorly because it's done by people who don't care about what they're doing, who only care about getting back at their parents. So the artwork, the editing, the spelling, all of it is done poorly. So we have to work under the assumption that DC Finest will be terrible. But we can hope. We can always hope. This next one, also one that I will just plain skip. This is The Flash. They're doing a volume of The Flash. It looks to me like this will probably be the beginning of the Silver Age Flash. So the beginning, the guy in this costume, as opposed to the older guy with a metal helmet on his head. When Flash changed costumes like this and was revamped for the modern era, that really did kick off a lot. That really did kick off a whole era of comics. Of course, this character doesn't interest me at all. He is not an interesting person. Oh, the baby shifted so we can shoot. He's not an interesting person. The issue where he gets his superpower, singular, he runs fast, goes out of its way to say that in his civilian identity he is not interesting. So we're supposed to think that the fact that he runs really fast makes him interesting. It doesn't. It doesn't. Adding that doesn't make it interesting. Catwoman is a more interesting figure than this. But they'll do it. Of course, they'll do it. Same thing with this. Same thing with this next one. Another DC Finest volume is Green Lantern. There is a Gil Kane cover, so that gives me hope that they will reprint a lot of classic old Gil Kane issues. But again, if anything, Hal Jordan might be worse than the Silver Age Flash, because the Silver Age Flash is just an ordinary guy. He is not a runner. He is not athletic at all. That would be one thing. If running were his passion and he were made into godlike speed, that would be one thing. But he isn't. He's just an office drone. He's just a police worker. That's all. But Hal Jordan, Green Lantern, might be even worse because we get the strong suspicion that he's a jerk. An ordinary guy, yes, but a jerk. Certainly someone who has no interest in celestial or galactic right and wrong, in fighting crime. No interest whatsoever. So again, we are supposed to think that the fact that he gets his superpower, which is a ring, he gets a magic ring, gets a superpower for a ring. Again, we're supposed to think that, well, that does it. He has a superpower ring now, so of course he'll be a superhero. I don't get that, and I never have gotten that. These will be interesting for the Gil Kane artwork, and also for the fact, as I've mentioned many times before, that with the possible exception of Marvel Comics character Havoc, the Silver Age Green Lantern has the single gayest costume of any superhero of them all. Thought I was going to be arrested for my heresy about the Flash and Green Lantern. Nevertheless, these are loser characters. They're not anybody you should be interested in. And if you're going to say, well, I wouldn't be interested in this character at all, but I am now that he has this gimmick, well, then what are you saying? What are you saying not only about the gimmick, but about how easy it is to woo your own interest? DC has to do it, of course, because Green Lantern is a signature character. But this next one is genuinely interesting, and we'll see if they actually do it. I'm not 100% sure that any of these volumes will actually be made, and I'm also not at all sure. In fact, I'm sure of the opposite. I'm sure that they'll be poorly done. But we shall see. I could be wrong. DC certainly has enough sane people left there in accounting and marketing to know what a good idea Marvel's Epic collections were. They have those people. Those people have certainly been able to say at meetings where they speak last, because they're heterosexual, that this demonstrably makes money, and we have the ability to do this. So we should do this. We will see. We will see. But this next one is the Justice Society of America. And it looks like this is Golden Age reprints. If so, this would be one of the most interesting volumes in this lineup, because these things haven't been reprinted in color in a long time, 30 years at least. I don't know what to expect from this cover. It's the Justice Society of America, but the original Sandman is he's not in the right getup for his time with the Justice Society. We'll see. We'll see what this is. A 1940s superhero team, the very first superhero team, and they were popular. The idea was, let's bring all these characters who have already appeared elsewhere into their own book. They're also ridiculously overpowered as a team. No one's ever actually addressed that. Even Jeff Johns, the writer Jeff Johns, did a great run on a revival of Justice Society, and even he didn't. He did it in the modern era. He didn't go back to the 1940s and try to address how powerful this team is. You have a lot of masked vigilantes. You've got Dr. Midnight, who can see in the dark. You've got I don't know, the original Atom, whose superpower is that he is short. You've got Black Canary, whose superpower is that she looks fantastic in fishnets. But you also have Hour Man, who can become super powerful, and for all we know, almost Kryptonian level super powerful for an hour. You've got Johnny Thunder, who's an ordinary guy, yes, but he commands an all-powerful genie. So unless you knock him out or gag him or something, he can command his genie to do literally anything. The thing is all-powerful. You've got Dr. Fate, who's essentially, he's a sorceress being, but he's physically invulnerable and also almost all-powerful. You've got Starman, who's an ordinary guy, but he has a scepter that channels cosmic radiation, apparently in endless amounts. You have the original Green Lantern, who is conspicuous by his absence on this cover. I don't know what to make of that. Of course, the original Green Lantern, the Alan Scott Green Lantern, has been retconned in DC to be gay, as has, I think by now, every character in the DC lineup, every superhero, all of them gay when gay people are 7 or 8% of the general population. They're 100% of superheroes. And maybe they're just going to try to skirt around that in here because that would conflict with their retconning. Alan Scott, the original Green Lantern, he's not gay, not really sexual at all, but he's certainly not, waving it in your face every time he talks, every time he opens his mouth. But he was the original Green Lantern. He's the original version of that concept we saw with Hal Jordan. He also has an all-powerful ring. And there's the Spectre, that white guy behind Wonder Woman, who is all-powerful. It isn't that he has a select bit of weaknesses, but he tries to overcome them. He's just an all-powerful being. This is a ridiculously overpowered team. It won't show in any of these old 1940s things. They did a really good job of it. So, but it would be amazing to see these reprinted. DC used to have a hardcover reprint line. The archive editions, I think they were called. I think I have a couple of them. And I think that was the last time any of this stuff was reprinted. Who knows what'll be in here? Oh, that'd be interesting. Then we have the Justice League of America, the new successor to the Justice Society. Only that you can see the Justice. Well, you won't know unless you're a comics fan. But Mike's the only one watching this video anyway, so he already knows this great Carmine Infantino cover. That is the Justice League, and they are facing off against the Justice Society because the writers came up with an idea to have these two groups meet each other. I don't know what that means for this issue. Again, I didn't look up whether or not DC has listed what issues are actually reprinted here. Once upon a time, about 20 years ago, DC did a color reprint paperback collecting a whole bunch of the meetings between the Justice League and the Justice Society. So those plates already exist. The template for that already exists. If they wanted to get by on the cheap, they would not reformat anything. They would just put all those plates together and make a new volume. They didn't even give it a new cover. None of these things have new covers. So it's possible that that's what we'll get here, just team-ups. And here we have the one that made me squeal, of course. This is DC Finest Legion, the Legion of Superheroes, my beloved Legion of Superheroes. This is called Zap Goes the Legion, and Jim Shooter is listed as one of the writers, Jim Shooter and Cary Bates. And that is, of course, a Nick Cardy cover from the issue introducing Timberwolf. That's a long time after the Legion first premiered. So I'm gathering that this is not going to start with the beginning of the Legion at all. That this is just going to be a bunch of Jim Shooter issues. Jim Shooter famously, of course, broke into the comic book industry when he was in his early teens. And was in it, is still in it. It was just, has been a towering figure, no pun intended. He's like 8 feet tall, but he's been a towering figure ever since. And is widely regarded, along with Paul Levitz, as one of the great writers of the Legion of Superheroes. So seeing these issues will be great. I'll be curious to know what's in this volume. I'm a little bit worried by the choice of cover. Not because it's Nick Cardy. Nick Cardy can do no wrong. What I wouldn't give for a big hardcover collected artwork of Nick Cardy. Not just comics, but everything that he did, the advertising world and all of it. But the thing that worries me is that this was the cover that DC used on a volume that they did when they briefly did black and white reprint volumes, the showcase editions, that gathered old back issues and reprinted them on cheap paper in black and white, again following the Marvel example. And I don't know, a part of me worries that they're just using the plates for that hard black and white volume. I'd like to think that won't be true. This could easily come from they did a Legion showcase volumes that were or archive editions that were full color and were hardcover. I have all of those. This just could be a chunk of that, a couple of volumes of that to make one paperback, big fat paperback volume. I'll take it either way. And it shows beyond a shadow of a doubt that DC is imitating the Epic Collection idea of not proceeding chronologically. obviously. I mean, you knew that anyway because of some of the other things I've shown you, but this cements it, that they're not necessarily proceeding chronologically. This is well into Legion lore. Whereas this next one is proceeding chronologically, as far as I can tell. This is Supergirl. And that is the cover of the famous issue where she arrives on Earth. Superman's cousin from the planet Krypton. So, howls of protest from some quarters of the comics fandom because suddenly Superman is not at all unique. His dog was already pushing the envelope. But here it's not only another full-grown Kryptonian, but a cousin of his, the daughter of his father's brother, with a long and complicated story that only gets more complicated when she comes to Earth and Superman puts her in an orphanage. What on earth? It's a twisted story, but it added a lot of fun to the Superman lineup. So, and I imagine this will be just a whole bunch of Supergirl's initial appearances. And then this first one, really, DC could not have avoided doing this for DC Finest. And that is the coming of Superman. This is Joe Siegel and Joe Shuster. That's the famous cover to Action Comics #1, showing a man lifting a car over his head. Easily. And they really couldn't have got away with a reprint line without doing this. I don't know that it couldn't have waited. I mean, you would think they couldn't get away with this without showing the beginning of the Legion of Superheroes, for instance. But no. And are you wondering who's missing here? Currently the only character in all of DC that makes money? Yeah, they're doing Batman as well. They're doing Batman years 1 and 2. So this will have Batman Year 1, which I've gone through on this channel. Batman Year 1, written by Frank Miller and drawn by David Mazzucchelli, is great. It's a great sequence of Batman, and it did so well that they did a Year 2, which is considerably not as great, but still interesting. And I don't know that they've ever been combined into one volume. So like the Justice Society volume, this is inherently interesting. We'll have to see what else is in here and what other things they're adding. Batman Year 1 and Batman Year 2 together will not account for the page count of this volume. So there must be other stuff involved. I don't know what it would be. And then the last thing here, this one confuses me. And I haven't asked Mike. I haven't looked at his video yet to see, as has become obvious. I haven't asked him yet what he thinks the rationale behind this is. But this is 0 Hour, Part 1, with, let's just say, inimitable Dan Jurgens artwork on the cover there. This was a mega event. DC became addicted to mega events, and they still are, continuity swapping mega events. This was among the list of those mega events. This one was pretty enjoyable visually because it was Jerry Ordway artwork, and he is a great comic book artist. But it was a lot of faffing around it. And again, the whole point of these mega events is to taunt the reader, which you wouldn't think would be a good business model, and it's not. But at least at this point, the taunting was limited to this. Because DC started the whole fad of mega events with something called Crisis on Infinite Earths, which really ought to be the mega event that's reprinted here. I don't know why it wouldn't be. I don't know why this isn't Crisis on Infinite Earths Volume 1. But they started off with Crisis on Infinite Earths, a big 12-issue mega event that they said was designed to simplify their complicated continuity, the 50 years of continuity. And no one liked it. No one. No one liked it. No comic book fan, not one single comic book fan had ever asked for that continuity to be simplified or ruined or primary colored or crayoned all over. No one had asked for that. And no one liked the result at all. And fans made that known. They bombarded DC Comics with letters for decades. Could you please just undo Crisis on Infinite Earths? Could you do that? And every time DC has one of these reality-altering events, they just had one a couple of years ago. They have one almost every year. Every time they do, they go right to issue number 11, teasing that they are just going to wipe out everything post-Crisis and bring DC back to normal. And then they don't do it. And then they make some decisions that'll be even worse. They make decisions that'll make things even worse. And this did that. It did it with fine artwork, but it still did that. Uh, so this confuses me. This decision confuses me. If anything, this should be Crisis on Infinite Earths, but I wouldn't do either. When there are a lot of other things that DC could be doing. And that's the second part of this comic book video for today. Mike came up with the idea that we should also suggest things that we think should be in DC Finest if the line happens and if it continues. If it happens, it will be popular because no one likes current DC comics. And the fact that no one likes current DC or Marvel comics is 100% the fault of Marvel and DC Comics. This is not a question of a changing industry. This is not a question of COVID-19. This is not a question of people not having the spending money. The comic book numbers are up everywhere else. This is that fans, readers of the comics, have very pointedly and very loudly completely rejected the ideology behind the two major superhero companies. The creators who are foisting that ideology on these characters know perfectly well that's the reason their issues don't sell. They know that perfectly well. It's not like they're off on cloud nine and they don't realize that they're cheesing people off. They know it. They have been told it in every conceivable way, and it makes them proud. It makes them proud. Now they have executive bosses, and in a normal world, executive bosses would see that all of their creative people are actually happy with the fact that they're cratering the industry, and they'd fire a lot of them and hire people who don't want to do that, who don't want to end their own business. But they haven't done that. I don't know why, but they haven't done that. I would say that it's because they're ideologically captured as well, but their ideology is money, and money never changes. So why they haven't done it, I have no idea. Afraid of lawsuits, afraid of having their houses firebombed, or their kids stalked at school. I have no idea. But either way, the reason why these things will do well is because no one buys current comic books. No one likes what's going on there. If you have been buying and paying attention to comics for 10 years, you can predict it. But even if you haven't been, and you just wander into a comic shop wanting to buy an issue of Wonder Woman, you're going to see it right away. You're going to see it right away. As soon as even if you don't know anything about the issue, you're going to read it, get 2 pages in. Okay, all right, there's Wonder Woman, and there's Wonder Girl, and there are some supporting characters. But, okay, the scene opens with them sitting in a cafe, and they're talking about what they're eating. I guess that's a little odd, but surely that means that in the middle of page 2, a supervillain is going to break through the cafe window. And then the comic is going to start. But no, it just keeps going. It just keeps going with them talking about what they're eating, with occasional side digressions about their politics, which are the politics of the people writing the book, as you know, because you read Twitter. So no one reads those things. No one wants them. Their sales have dropped by 80%. The new issue of some previously flagship DC title, like, well, Justice Society or Justice League, be lucky if it sells 1,000 issues across the whole country in a week. That's just astonishing. 1,000 issues. Well, like I mentioned, 1,000 copies of a new issue was what Stan Lee used to give away. but if DC does this lineup, and I'm hoping that they do, there are a whole bunch of things that they should add to it. And I thought I would make a list of those to show you, just to finish up what's going to be a long video anyway. I have not yet watched Michael K. Vaughan's video. I'm not sure of his upload schedule since he's at Rustic Vaughan Lodge. But I'm still going to indulge. A lot of you really like it when I indulge in predicting some of his choices. There's one thing I know he's going to include on his list because he told me. And that is the great Joe Kubert error on Hawkman. And on that I totally agree. That was a great run by a great artist. Took a dumb, boring character. I mean, he's got wings. And made him really interesting. Those issues are wonderful, and they aren't reprinted enough. A nice, big, heavy trade paperback that reprints everything would be terrific. And there's one other thing that I'm thinking that Mike and I will agree on. And it's the first one here. It's the Neil Adams Batman. Neil Adams is the artist here, and he took over on, I think it was Denny O'Neil's Batman. He took over the artwork and gave readers something they had never seen before in comic book artwork. And it was pretty amazing. It was pretty amazing. I say that even though I myself I've never been much of a Batman fan, and the more he's become a kind of civic religion, the less I've been a fan of him. But nevertheless, the Neil Adams issues, any chance you get to reprint them in a volume would be great. We'll have to see if the DC people that are involved in DC Finest have the same attitude towards their most popular products that the Epic Collection people seem to have, which is to not reprint them, which is to not reprint them. The Frank Miller Daredevil, the Walt Simonson Thor, these things have not been reprinted in Epic Collections, so maybe they'll shy away from the Neil Adams Batman. But I'm pretty sure that Mike will suggest this one as well. There's one other thing out there. It's right exactly in the time period when he was imprinted out of the egg like a little chick on comics. But it's so dude, bro. I'm so much hoping. There was a dumb comic called Warlord. It had pretty good artwork by Mike Grell. Really awkward, but pretty good artwork by Mike Grell. And Mike Grell became signature with the character. In fact, he might have created the character. But it's so dumb. It's a guy in a Speedo with a gray goatee, nevertheless trying to convince you for issue after issue that he's heterosexual. It's just so dumb. So I'm hoping that doesn't get a vote for Michael K. Vaughan. But a couple of these others he might agree with. Like, for instance, The Phantom Stranger. In the Jim Aparo era, The Phantom Stranger was a kind of paranormal detective, a little bit on the mysterious side, until he was shifted over into being completely supernatural. And an artist named Jim Aparo took over for the artwork chores and created 20 issues, 30 issues, the perfect size for one of these DC Finest volumes that really are terrific. They really are moody and atmospheric. Then this next one, a massive moneymaker for DC, mysteriously not in their lineup, this original lineup of DC Finest. But they've got to do it, unless, again, they look at it and think, like the Neil Adams Batman, this is one we're not going to do, and that is the George Perez Teen Titans. In the 1980s, Marv Wolfman and George Perez relaunched the superhero team that originally started with teenage sidekicks of their mainline heroes. Somebody had the idea, hey, the teens, or the Bobby Soxers and the Zoot Suits and whatnot, surely they will buy comics if they're in them. So let's make a team out of these kids. And the idea took off. It didn't take off as much as the Legion in the UK. I'm talking about a superhero team of teenagers. It didn't take off like the Legion, but it did take off. And ran for a long time. It got worse and worse as it went along, as comics tend to do. And then it lapsed. And then Marv Wolfman and George Perez, the artist George Perez, revamped the team. So we have figures that we know. Kid Flash, Robin, Wonder Girl. We also have this guy here, this green guy turning into a green leopard. Eagle-eyed fans, when they saw this first appeared as an inset feature in DC Presents. Didn't have its own first issue until they got feedback from that first appearance in DC Presents. And the feedback was overwhelming and hugely positive. And people who saw that were intrigued by the fact that this character has a long continuity, as long as Robin, or not as long as Robin, but as long as the original Teen Titans only never connected with them. This is a character he was called Changeling. And Beast Boy. He was a character from older issues of a lame-ass team called Doom Patrol. He's green, and he can turn into any kind of animal, but they are also green. And all of a sudden, he's a member of the Teen Titans, and it was a perfect fit. It was a perfect idea. Very much echoed in Chris Claremont's all-new, all-different X-Men that came out around the same time and made the same kind of gigantic hay bales of money for Marvel Comics, where you looked at this new team and you saw some things you recognized, Professor X, Cyclops, Jean Grey, and some people you didn't recognize. You're looking at this cover if you're seeing this for the first time, and you don't have any idea who half these people are. But you also saw people that you did recognize, but that you weren't expecting to see where they were. Like, for instance, the old X-Men villain, the Banshee. Only now he's a member of a team. The original run on this was fantastic. Just fantastic. Went on and on, got better and better as it went along, more and more involving. Then, Wolfman and Perez left. The comic started to buckle under the weight of its own melodrama. And then, for a brief period, Perez came back. and his artwork always continued to evolve. So his artwork was much, much different, much better. And he came back and drew the Teen Titans for like a 10 issues, something like that. Uh, a big volume, reprinting at least the first 30 issues of the new Teen Titans from the 80s would be great. I don't know why it isn't in the original lineup. And as long as we're mentioning that, we might as well go to my next pick, which is the original Teen Titans. Print the original Teen Titans. Give us a volume of the Teen Titans from decades before Wolfman and Perez. This era could be very dorky, but it eventually evolved into a string of issues that were really good in the 60s. With Nick Cardy covers. All of them did. If you don't want to have new artwork for the cover, and I agree with that, you probably shouldn't want to, save money where you can, find a great old Nick Cardy cover and put it on there. His covers are fantastic. Then I think I skipped in the DC Finest. They're also doing a volume of Wonder Woman, comparatively later in Wonder Woman's history. I'm not looking forward to that volume. If I remember correctly, the issues they're reprinting are pretty strident, pretty bigoted, and pretty low on action. We'll see. But it immediately got me thinking, of course, it might be a little awkward to reprint a whole volume of Wonder Woman's original appearances because they're even weirder. They are really, really weird. But she also had a great era. Again, I don't want to stress George Perez too much here, but he... Marvel Comics relaunched Wonder Woman after Crisis on Infinite Earths with a #1 issue, and with artwork by George Perez, and those issues were great, and they are enough. There are enough of them to fill out a big, generous paperback volume. So the Perez era of Wonder Woman. Then the series here is called DC Finest. That is an obvious callback to a title that ran for a long, long time, decades, with DC Comics, and was, for a time, in the late 1940s and early 1950s, really popular with their fans. It exists now. It was relaunched. It is very intentionally being written in a way that is very intentionally ignoring the ideological capture of the mother company. And it's making money, which is why the ideologues all around it have not crushed it, because they've obviously been told not to. That is World's Finest. A venerable old title in which Batman and Superman team up. And I love the current Mark Waid run on World's Finest. I think it's fantastic stuff. But I would reprint a volume of earlier stuff. A lot of... This is #1, World's Finest, World's Best Comics #1. The template of this issue and a couple of years that followed this was you get a Superman story, you get a Batman story, you get a bunch of stories of other people, and it's just a big anthology comic. Then, after a while, the main story in World's Finest started to be one in which Batman and Superman actually team up together, where they're not just in the same issue, they're in the same story. I would say start there. Start with the issue the famous issue where they realize each other's secret identities, and reprint a bunch of those stories. These great old World's Finest issues from 60 years ago, or something like that. And then we'll finish up my suggestions with two teenagers in spandex. We'll finish up my suggestion with two characters who sold really, really well for DC Comics once upon a time, or Fawcett Comics before they were bought. The first one is Captain Marvel Jr. Not Captain Marvel, not the real Captain Marvel. Of course, the archetypal Captain Marvel character is a boy named Billy Batson, who meets a wizard who gives him the power to say a magic word, Shazam, and transform into a character called Captain Marvel, who is incredibly powerful. He's basically Superman. And Captain Marvel solves crimes and busts up spy rings and whatnot, fights giant robots. And when he says the magic word, he transforms back into Billy Batson. And that's an odd arrangement. That's really odd. As I've said many, many times before, who is Captain Marvel? Who is he? He's not Billy Batson. Now he is. In the current DC realization of the character, he is just Billy Batson in a grown-up body. But for 50 years, he was not. He was a different person. So who is he? And what do we know about him? And also, when he finds himself in the world, flying around and plugging volcanoes and fighting Dr. Savannah and whatnot, when all that is over and he's won, why would he ever transform back into a kid, to a 12-year-old kid? Why would he do that? He's not on any kind of time limit. That would be interesting, but that never happened. He just transforms on his own. He gives up his own life every issue. It's really, really kind of strange. But if that was strange, this is even stranger because the Captain Marvel was a huge success, huge, outsold Superman. So the powers that be wanted spin-offs right away, as many as you could possibly get. Captain Marvel had a huge number of spin-offs. And one was Captain Marvel Jr., who is a newspaper salesman, a little boy named Freddie Freeman, who is lame. He has a crutch, walks on a crutch, and he's poor. He lives by a shack down by the river, and he sells newspapers for a penny apiece and whatnot. I guess gets some sort of commission. And he is given the ability to transform into a superpower being by saying the name Captain Marvel. His magic word is not Shazam. He says Captain Marvel, and he becomes Captain Marvel Jr., which means, yes, you are correct, he is the only superhero in either company in all of time who cannot say his own name to the public. If somebody comes up to Captain Marvel Jr. after he's saved people from a burning building and says, "Who are you?" he can't say, "I'm Captain Marvel Jr.," because the minute he says Captain Marvel, he's going to transform back into Freddie Freeman. So he just has to say, I don't know, how does he introduce himself? I don't think anyone's ever had a scene like that. Does he say, "I'm Junior"? Or "I'm Friend"? Or whatever? I don't know. I don't know how he says it, but he can't say his own name. But you'll notice the key difference there between him and Captain Marvel. Captain Marvel Jr. is a non-lame version of Freddie Freeman. He's not any older than Freddie Freeman. They're the same person, except that Captain Marvel Jr. has this, skin-tight blue spandex costume, is not lame, and has unbelievable superpowers. Captain Marvel Jr. and also Mary Marvel are not any weaker than Captain Marvel. They're well able to, do anything, basically. They're invulnerable. They can fly. They have super speed. You admit that's an even stranger prospect. Captain Marvel, well, okay, he might be obliged by the wizard to give Billy Batson his own life. He might even maybe take some vicarious pleasure in Billy Batson's life. We don't know anything about Captain Marvel, so we have no idea what he thinks of Billy Batson. But Captain Marvel Jr. is Freddie Freeman. And why on earth, once you realize you could transform into an indestructible, completely hale and healthy version of yourself, why would you ever transform back? It's not even a question of, that if Captain Marvel doesn't say the magic word and transform back into Billy Batson, people might wonder where Billy Batson is. That would certainly be true. Maybe that motivates him. I don't know why he'd care. But this isn't even a question of that, because Captain Marvel Jr. could just put on Freddie Freeman's clothes and tell people my leg's feeling much better, I don't need this crutch anymore, and never transform back. That was a real mystery, but for a long time, Captain Marvel Jr. was incredibly popular and beautifully illustrated by Mac Reboy. Just the artwork in these issues is not what you're expecting from a 1940s era comic book. And it was reprinted. Those old hardcover archive editions of DC Comics, they reprinted, I think, every Mac Reboy Captain Marvel Jr. issue. I think they reprinted them all in one volume. I don't know that there are that many of them. But Kurt Schaffenberger took over to do Captain Marvel Jr. Adventures, and even one particular issue of John Newton. You could easily do a big volume of this character. I don't see DC doing that with Captain Marvel Jr. before they do it with Captain Marvel, or, given the current politics of the company, Mary Marvel would probably have to come before either of them. But I would love to see it. And if I would love to see that volume of a teenage boy fighting crime, then you can imagine how much I want to see this one, which is a nice DC Finest volume of Superboy. Not the clone Superboy, not the gay Superboy, but the adventures of Clark Kent when he was a boy in Smallville. Superboy was also a huge seller for a long time. Sales dwindled after a while, but at first, Superboy, the comic, in Superboy and in Adventure Comics, was a huge seller. Also with the youth market. And as a result, there's an endless number of issues that you could choose from to review, to reprint for these volumes. I would like to see that. I would like to see a Superboy volume. Of course, if I'm unlikely to see a Captain Marvel Jr. volume, I'm even less likely to see this. Because I don't think DC doesn't seem to want to do anything with the character of Superboy, of Superman when he was a boy. They don't seem to want to do anything with this character. I think it's a... What's up, baby? My little crypto. What's up? Huh? Who's the baby? What are you doing? Do you want to come down here? Give them some free yoga? Oh, no, you're not going to give them any free yoga. All right. I've never been able to get to the bottom of what's going on here. It seems to me to be legal. But DC Comics almost completely avoids any kind of use of this character anymore. So I doubt I'll ever see a volume like this, but that is one that I would like to see, and I could go on. Oh my, I could go on. Another thing that might make Mike's list would be Swamp Thing, but I'm also thinking about Adam Strange, who really deserves a volume like this. There are a whole bunch of candidates that I could do for DC Finest, but those are some to start things off. I don't know how many of them I'll see. I would really like to see the ones that seem obvious to me are Neil Adams Batman and the George Perez Teen Titans. Those seem obvious to me, but I'll be very interested in seeing what these things are like. I have a feeling that if they actually do come out and start to come out on time, that Mike and I might be talking about them on Epic Comic Book Wednesday to the two people who watch these videos. I'll be curious to know the release schedule, because there are a few things there that I don't want. I won't be buying the Flash volume. I won't be buying the Green Lantern volume. I won't be buying the Catwoman volume. Another character who sold really well during the 40s and early 50s was Robin. It'd be nice if there was a volume of him. He's had more than enough material. But again, if DC did a DC Finest of Robin, they would probably do one from a much later era and not Dick Grayson in the 1940s. But quite a few of these volumes I will be buying. I'll buy the Superman volume, even though I have those original issues of the Siegel and Schuster Superman have been reprinted generously, as befits the greatest and first of all superheroes. That's fitting. I'll get that. Definitely. The Batman volume is probably interesting enough to get. The Justice Society volume, definitely. And the Justice League volume 2, depending on what's in there, I'll get some of them. Of course, there's no question about the Legion. Both I and every other diehard Legion fan, we are known in the comics world for our singular devotion. We even bought the Identity Politics Mania Dream that was the last Legion of Superheroes monthly comic. It wasn't just calling it infested with identity politics and Twitter politics would be an understatement. It was a fever dream of those things. We bought it anyway. I even did reviews of it on this channel. So I won't get all of these issues, but I'll be interested in seeing what the ones that I do get are like. So I'll probably report back. But anyway, this has gone on quite long enough. I'm going to wrap this up, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.